They handed her over like currency, bruised, silent, expected to disappear. Jane Whitmore had 24 hours left to live, traded by her own mother to Chicago's most feared crime lord. The insurance policy was already signed. The body wouldn't even need to be hidden. But when Marco DeLuca lifted her chin in that dimly lit room and saw what had been done to her, something inside the untouchable Mafia boss cracked open. And the woman who sold her daughter's life had no idea she'd just made the worst transaction of her career. If you want to see how this story ends, stay with me until the final word. And when you do, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Jane's story travels. The rain came down in sheets that night, turning Chicago's streets into rivers of neon and shadow. Jane Whitmore sat in the back of a black sedan, her wrists bound with zip ties that had already cut into her skin. She didn't bother looking out the window. There was no point. The city had stopped being home the moment her mother's hand connected with her face 3 days ago, the final beating in a lifetime of them. The driver didn't speak. Neither did the man beside her, a muscle-bound enforcer whose name she'd never learned and didn't want to know. They were delivering a package. That's all she was now, a debt payment, a transaction. Her mother's voice still echoed in her head, syrupy, sweet, and venomous all at once. "You've finally become useful, Jane. Imagine that." Useful. The word tasted like copper and shame. The sedan pulled up to a building that didn't look like much from the outside. Industrial brick, forgettable, the kind of place you'd drive past without a second glance. But Jane had heard the stories. Everyone in Chicago had. This was DeLuca territory. And Marco DeLuca didn't just run an empire. He was the empire. Untouchable. Ruthless. The kind of man mothers warned their daughters about, except Jane's mother had gift-wrapped her and sent her straight to his door. The zip ties were cut. Rough hands pulled her from the car. Rain soaked through her thin dress within seconds, plastering dark hair to her face. She stumbled, but didn't fall. Falling felt like surrender, and she'd done enough of that already. Inside, the building transformed. Polished floors, soft lighting, the scent of expensive cologne and leather. 2 more men flanked her as they walked her down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat screaming, "Run, run, run," but there was nowhere to go. There never had been. They stopped in front of a heavy oak door. One of the men knocked twice, then pushed it open. The office was warm, unexpectedly so. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the rain-soaked city, lights blinking like dying stars. And behind a massive mahogany desk sat Marco DeLuca. He was younger than she'd imagined, mid-30s maybe, dark hair swept back, sharp jawline, eyes the color of smoke. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, charcoal gray, no tie. His hands were folded on the desk, and he didn't move when she was shoved into the room. "Leave us," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that made you listen. The men hesitated. "Boss, she's—" "I said leave." They left. The door clicked shut behind them. Jane stood dripping on his expensive rug, arms wrapped around herself, waiting for whatever came next. Pain, probably. Humiliation. Death, if she was lucky. Her mother had explained it all with that practiced smile, the one she used on everyone who didn't know better. The insurance policy had been taken out months ago. $2 million. Jane just had to die for it to pay out. And what better way than a violent accident in the criminal underworld? Tragic. Unavoidable. Profitable. Marco DeLuca didn't speak. He studied her instead, gray eyes moving over her face with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Not because it was predatory, though she'd expected that, but because it felt like he was seeing her, actually seeing her, and Jane hadn't been seen in so long she'd forgotten what it felt like. "Sit down," he said finally. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her legs had locked up. He sighed, rising from his chair with the kind of fluid grace that came from absolute confidence. He was tall, broader than she'd expected. He crossed the room, and Jane flinched, an automatic response her body had learned years ago. Flinch first, brace for impact second. But the impact didn't come. Instead, Marco stopped 2 feet away, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly as he studied the bruises on her face, the split lip, the finger-shaped marks on her throat, the way she held her left arm close to her ribs because breathing hurt. "Who did this to you?" His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but something underneath it had shifted, gone sharp and cold. Jane opened her mouth, closed it. Words felt dangerous. The truth felt impossible. I asked you a question. Not harsh, just expectant, like he genuinely wanted an answer. My mother, she whispered. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and damning. Marco's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. He reached up slowly, telegraphing every movement like he was approaching a wounded animal. His fingers caught her chin, gentle, so gentle it made her throat close up, and tilted her face toward the light. She stopped breathing. He examined her the way a jeweler might examine a stone, cataloging every fracture, every imperfection. The bruises, the cuts, the haunted look in her brown eyes. When he finally released her, his hand fell back to his side, and Jane swayed slightly, dizzy from holding her breath. Sit, he said again. This time her legs obeyed. She sank into the leather chair across from his desk, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Marco returned to his seat. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he pulled a crystal decanter from a side table, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass, and set it in front of her. Drink. It's not a request. She picked up the glass with trembling hands. The whiskey burned going down, but it cut through the fog in her head, sharpened the edges of the world just enough that she could think again. Marco watched her, waiting. Why am I here? Jane's voice came out raspy, barely above a whisper. You tell me. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. I was told a delivery would arrive tonight. Payment for a debt your mother owed. What I wasn't told was why she'd send her own daughter as collateral. Jane barked out a laugh, sharp, bitter, edged with hysteria. Collateral? Is that what she called it? Marco's eyes narrowed. What would you call it? An execution. The words spilled out before she could stop them. She took out a life insurance policy, $2 million. All she has to do is wait for you to kill me, and she collects. The silence that followed was absolute. Marco didn't move, didn't blink. But something in the room shifted, temperature dropping by degrees until the air itself felt dangerous. Say that again, he said softly. So she did. She told him everything, the policy, the planned accident, the way her mother had smiled while explaining how easy it would be, how no one would ask questions if Marco DeLuca's organization was involved. She told him about the beatings that had gotten worse over the past month, designed to leave marks, to build a narrative of abuse that would make her death look inevitable. She told him about the years before that, the control, the isolation, the way her mother had shaped her into something small and silent and easy to erase. And when she was done, Marco DeLuca sat perfectly still, his face carved from granite, eyes burning with something that might have been rage if rage could be that precise, that focused. She sent you here to die, he said. Not a question, a confirmation. Yes. And you came anyway. Jane's laugh was hollow. Where else was I supposed to go? She made sure I had nowhere, no money, no friends, no one who'd believe me over her. She met his eyes, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look away. So yeah, I came. Because at least this way it's over. Marco stood abruptly, the movement sharp enough to make Jane flinch again. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He crossed to the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the rain-slicked city. Do you know what I do? He asked. You run the DeLuca family. You control half of Chicago. You kill people who cross you. Her voice was flat, reciting facts like a grocery list. Yes, he turned to face her. I do all of those things, but I don't kill women. And I sure as hell don't kill women who've been beaten half to death and handed over like livestock. Jane blinked. That wasn't what she'd expected. Then what are you going to do with me? Marco's smile was thin, dangerous, and entirely without humor. I'm going to make your mother regret every decision she's ever made. But first, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. She nodded, throat tight. Do you want to live, Jane? The question hit her like a physical blow. No one had ever asked her that before. Not in all 26 years of her existence. She'd been told what to do, where to go, how to act. She'd been molded and controlled and beaten into compliance. But no one had ever asked what she wanted. Her voice cracked. I don't know. That's honest. Marco moved back to his desk, leaned against it, arms crossed. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here tonight. You're going to eat, sleep, and see a doctor. Tomorrow, when you're thinking clearly, I'm going to ask you again. And if the answer is yes, if you want to live, then we're going to figure out how to make that happen. Together. Why? The question burst out of her. Why would you help me? You don't know me. I'm nobody. You're somebody who walked into a death trap with her eyes open because she didn't see another choice. That takes a kind of courage most people don't have. His expression softened, just slightly. And your mother made a mistake thinking I'd be her weapon. I don't appreciate being used, so consider this a professional courtesy and a personal insult I intend to repay. Jane's hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was something else, something unfamiliar and terrifying in its own way. Hope. Marco pressed a button on his desk. The door opened and a woman appeared, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, dressed in elegant black. Not an enforcer. Something else. Elena, Marco said, take Jane upstairs, guest suite. Get her whatever she needs, and call Dr. Ramos. Elena's gaze swept over Jane, assessing without judgment. Of course. Jane stood on unsteady legs. She looked at Marco, at this man who should have been her executioner, but was instead offering her, what? Sanctuary? Revenge? A chance? I don't understand you, she said quietly. Marco's smile was faint. You will, or you won't. Either way, you'll be alive to figure it out. Elena led her through the hallways that felt like another world. Soft carpets, artwork that probably cost more than Jane had ever seen in her life. Silence that felt like safety instead of suffocation. They took an elevator up 3 floors, and when the doors opened, Jane stepped into a space that made her chest tighten. The guest suite was bigger than the apartment she'd shared with her mother. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, a king-size bed with impossibly soft-looking sheets, a bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. Everything was clean, elegant, untouched. The closet has basics, Elena said, her voice brisk but not unkind. Clothes, toiletries. If you need something specific, use the phone on the nightstand. Press 1. Someone will answer. Jane nodded numbly. Elena moved toward the door, then paused. The doctor will be here in 20 minutes. She's discreet. She won't ask questions you don't want to answer. Thank you, Jane whispered. Elena's expression shifted, something almost maternal flickering across her features. You're safe here. Whatever you think is going to happen, whatever you've been told, none of it is true. Marco DeLuca is many things, but he's not a monster. Not to people who don't deserve it. And then she was gone, the door clicking shut softly behind her. Jane stood in the center of the room, dripping rainwater onto expensive hardwood, and felt the dam inside her crack. She made it to the bathroom before the sobs came, ugly, wrenching sounds that tore out of her chest like they'd been trapped there for years. She sank to the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, and cried until there was nothing left. When she finally stopped, the silence felt different. Not empty. Just quiet. She peeled off her wet dress, caught sight of herself in the mirror, and froze. The bruises were worse than she'd thought. Purple and yellow blotches across her ribs, her arms, her throat, the split lip, the swollen eye. She looked like a battlefield. This is what she did to you. This is what you survived. Jane ran a bath because standing in the shower felt like too much effort. The water was scalding, almost painful, but she sank into it anyway, letting the heat seep into her bones. She stayed there until the water went cold, until her fingers pruned, until she felt almost human again. The doctor arrived exactly when Elena said she would, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands. She examined Jane with clinical efficiency, asked permission before every touch, and cataloged injuries without commentary. 2 cracked ribs, severe bruising, mild dehydration, nothing that wouldn't heal, given time. You're stronger than you look, Dr. Ramos said as she packed up her bag. Most people would have collapsed by now. Jane didn't feel strong. She felt like glass held together by sheer stubbornness. But she nodded anyway. After the doctor left, Elena returned with food. Soup, bread, nothing heavy. Jane ate because her body demanded it, not because she tasted anything. When she was done, Elena took the tray and dimmed the lights. "Get some sleep," she said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Jane climbed into the bed, and the sheets were exactly as soft as they'd looked. She should have felt out of place, uncomfortable, like an intruder in someone else's life. But instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. She fell asleep with the rain drumming against the windows and the city glittering below, and for the first time in recent memory, she didn't dream about drowning. Booked. Morning came with soft light and the smell of coffee. Jane woke disoriented, heart racing, before she remembered where she was. Not in her mother's house, not in some cheap motel. Here, in Marco DeLuca's building, in a room that felt like a sanctuary. She sat up slowly, testing her ribs. Still hurt. Still real. A knock at the door made her tense. "It's Elena," came the voice from the other side. "Come in." Elena entered with a tray, coffee, fruit, pastries, and set it on the bedside table. "Mr. DeLuca would like to see you after you've eaten, whenever you're ready." "What time is it?" "Just after 9. Jane had slept for almost 12 hours. She ate because Elena stood there watching, because saying no felt impossible. The coffee was perfect. The fruit was fresh. The pastries melted in her mouth. Her body absorbed it all like a drowning person gasping for air. When she was done, Elena showed her the closet. It was stocked with clothes in her size, jeans, soft sweaters, simple dresses. Nothing flashy. Everything comfortable. "How did you—" "Mr. DeLuca is thorough." Elena handed her a pair of jeans and a gray sweater. "Get dressed. I'll wait outside." Jane dressed quickly, caught her reflection in the mirror again. The bruises hadn't faded, but they looked less raw in the morning light. She pulled her hair back, splashed water on her face, and tried to look like someone who knew what she was doing. She failed. But she tried. Elena led her back downstairs, through different hallways this time, to a sunlit room that looked nothing like the office from last night. This was warmer, lived in. Bookshelves lined one wall. A leather couch faced a window overlooking a private garden. And Marco DeLuca sat at a small table, reading a newspaper, coffee cup in hand. He looked up when she entered. "Sit." Elena disappeared again, silent as a ghost. Jane sat. Marco folded the newspaper, set it aside. He studied her the way he had last night, cataloging, assessing. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck." "Honest." "Accurate." He poured her a cup of coffee, slid it across the table. "Dr. Ramos said you'll heal. Ribs will take a few weeks." Jane wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. "Why are you doing this?" "I told you last night." "No, I mean really. What do you want from me?" Her voice was steadier now, sharper. "Nobody does something like this without wanting something back." Marco leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and for a moment she thought he might be offended, but then his mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. "You're smarter than you pretend to be." "I had to be. Stupid girls don't survive in my mother's house." "Fair point." He picked up his coffee. "Here's the truth, Jane. Your mother tried to use me. She set up a scenario where I'd be blamed for your death, where she'd profit, and where I'd be none the wiser. That pisses me off. So yes, I want something from you. I want your cooperation in making sure she pays for that. But I'm not going to force you. If you want to walk out that door right now, you can. I'll give you money, a clean ID, and a head start. No strings." Jane's throat tightened. "And if I stay?" "Then we make her regret every decision she's ever made." His voice dropped, went cold. "Together." The word hung between them like a promise. Jane set down her cup. Her hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from anger, from something fierce and burning that she'd spent her whole life tamping down. What would that look like? Marco smiled. It wasn't kind. "First, we keep you alive, publicly. Make it clear you're under my protection. That alone will send a message. Second, we gather evidence, everything she's done, every crime, every lie. And third," he paused, eyes glittering, "we expose her. In front of everyone she's ever tried to impress. We take away the things she values most." "Her reputation," Jane breathed. "Exactly. She'll fight back. She always does." "Let her." Marco's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "She's fighting someone who actually knows how to win." Jane looked at this man. This criminal, this killer, this person who should terrify her but instead made her feel something dangerously close to powerful. Why do I trust you? Because I haven't lied to you yet, and because deep down, you know I'm the only chance you've got. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. So I'm asking you again, Jane. Do you want to live? This time the answer came easily. Yes. Good. Marco stood, extended his hand across the table. Then let's get started. Jane took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, steady. And for the first time in 26 years, she felt like she was shaking hands with an ally instead of an enemy, maybe even a friend. The rain had stopped. Outside the window, Chicago glittered in the morning sun, sharp and bright and full of possibilities. Jane had spent her entire life being small, being silent, being invisible. But standing here, hand clasped in Marco DeLuca's, she felt something shift inside her chest. She was done disappearing, and her mother had no idea what was coming. The first lesson came that same afternoon. Marco led her to a different room, smaller, more intimate, with a single wall of windows overlooking the garden. A table sat in the center, covered in file folders, photographs, documents. Jane recognized her mother's handwriting on some of them and felt her stomach turn. Sit, Marco said, pulling out a chair for her. She sat, stared at the table. What is all this? Your mother's life. Every transaction, every lie, every corner she's cut. He took the seat across from her, reached for a folder, and opened it. Inside were bank statements, photocopies of checks, transfer records. She's been skimming from the charity she runs. 10,000 here, 20,000 there, small enough not to trigger audits, large enough to fund a very comfortable lifestyle. Jane's hands curled into fists. She always said the charity barely broke even, that we couldn't afford anything extra. She lied. Marco slid another folder across. She also has 3 different bank accounts under shell corporations, offshore holdings in the Caymans, a condo in Miami she bought with cash. He tapped the papers. Your mother is worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 million, and she made you believe you were broke. The room tilted. Jane gripped the edge of the table, trying to breathe through the rage building in her chest. 8 million. While she'd worn the same 3 outfits for years. While she'd eaten ramen because her mother said they couldn't afford groceries. While she'd been told over and over that she was a burden, a drain, a waste of resources. Why? Her voice came out strangled. Why would she do that? Control. Marco's tone was matter-of-fact, like he'd seen this pattern 100 times before. Money gives you options. Options give you power. She kept you powerless on purpose. Jane looked up at him, vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. And the insurance policy? Marco pulled out another folder. This one was thinner. Inside was a copy of the policy itself, $2 million. Jane's name listed as the insured, her mother as the sole beneficiary. The date was from 4 months ago. She took this out right after you turned 26, Marco said. Old enough that she couldn't claim you as a dependent anymore. Old enough that your death wouldn't raise as many questions. She planned this. It wasn't a question. Jane could see it now, clear as glass. The escalating violence, the isolation, the careful construction of a narrative where her death would seem inevitable, almost merciful. How long have you known? Since last night. I made some calls after you went to bed. Marco closed the folder. Your mother reached out to an associate of mine 2 weeks ago, said she had a payment coming, asked if I'd be willing to accept alternative collateral. I told her to deliver it personally. I wanted to see what she was offering, and she offered me. Yes, but she made a mistake. Marco's eyes went hard. She assumed I wouldn't ask questions, that I'd take one look at you and see an opportunity. She was wrong. Jane stared at the files spread across the table, at the evidence of her mother's betrayal documented in black and white. Part of her wanted to look away, to pretend she hadn't seen it, but the rest of her, the part that had shaken Marco's hand that morning, wanted to memorize every word. What do we do with this? She asked. We use it, but not yet. Marco gathered the folders, stacked them neatly. First, we need to make sure you're ready. Your mother is going to come looking for you. When she does, you need to be strong enough to face her without breaking. I won't break. The words came out fierce, almost vicious. Marco studied her, head tilted. You say that now. But she's had 26 years to get inside your head. That's not something you just walk away from. Then teach me how. Jane leaned forward, meeting his gaze head on. You said we'd do this together, so teach me. Something shifted in Marco's expression. Not quite approval, but close. All right. Lesson 1. Stop apologizing for taking up space. I don't. You do. You made yourself smaller when Elena came into the room this morning. You flinched when I pulled out your chair. You say thank you for things you don't need to be grateful for. His voice was firm, but not unkind. You've been trained to disappear. I need you visible. Jane swallowed hard. I don't know how to be visible. Then we'll start small. Marco stood, gestured for her to do the same. Walk across the room. Don't slouch. Don't drop your eyes. Act like you belong here. It sounded simple. It wasn't. Jane stood, shoulders automatically curving inward, and took a step, then another. Halfway across the room, she caught herself looking at the floor and forced her chin up. It felt wrong, exposed, like she was begging to be noticed. Again, Marco said. She walked back, tried to straighten her spine, failed. Again, and again, and again. For 20 minutes, Marco made her walk back and forth across that room until her ribs ached and her legs trembled. Every time she slouched, he corrected her. Every time she dropped her gaze, he called her out. It was exhausting and humiliating and strangely liberating all at once. Finally, he held up a hand. Better. Not perfect, but better. Jane collapsed into the chair, breathing hard. Does it ever get easier? Eventually. Right now, you're fighting years of conditioning. That takes time. Marco poured her a glass of water from a pitcher on the side table. But you're already doing better than most people would. Most people didn't grow up with my mother. True. He handed her the glass. Which is why you're going to survive what comes next. Jane drank, letting the cold water soothe her throat. What does come next? You learn how to fight back. Not with fists, though we'll cover that too, but with words, with presence, with the ability to look someone in the eye and make them believe you're not afraid. Marco sat on the edge of the table, arms crossed. Your mother's weapon is fear. We're going to take that away from her. How? By making you untouchable. The word settled over Jane like a cloak. Untouchable. It sounded impossible. But then again, so did sitting in a crime lord's home, planning revenge against the woman who'd given birth to her. When does she find out I'm alive? Jane asked. Soon. I'm having someone deliver a message this afternoon. Marco's smile was sharp. Nothing explicit, just enough to let her know the delivery didn't go as planned. Jane's pulse quickened. She'll come here. Probably. And when she does, you're going to be ready. He pushed off the table. Come on. There's someone I want you to meet. They left the room, walked through more hallways. Jane was starting to map the building in her head, learning its rhythms, and took an elevator down 2 floors. When the doors opened, they stepped into what looked like a private gym. Weights, punching bags, mats on the floor. And in the center of it all, a woman in athletic gear running through a series of brutal-looking kicks. She stopped when she saw them, breathing hard, dark hair pulled back in a tight braid. She was maybe 30, compact and muscular, with the kind of scars that told stories. Jane, this is Risa, Marco said. She's going to teach you how to defend yourself. Risa looked Jane up and down, gaze clinical. You ever been in a fight? Not one I won. Good. Means you don't have bad habits to unlearn. Risa grabbed a towel, wiped sweat from her face. We'll start with basics. How to stand, how to move, how to hit without breaking your hand. Sound good? Jane nodded, throat tight. Great, get changed. There's gear in the locker room. Risa pointed to a door on the far side of the gym. And leave the fear at the door. It won't help you here. Marco touched Jane's shoulder, brief, grounding. You've got this. Jane wasn't sure she believed him. But she went to the locker room anyway, changed into the workout clothes someone had already stocked there in her size, and came back out feeling like a fraud. Risa was waiting, patient and focused. All right, Risa said. Show me your stance. Jane had no idea what that meant. She stood there, weight on one hip, arms hanging uselessly at her sides. Risa circled her like a predator. You want to be balanced. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, hands up, protecting your face. She demonstrated and Jane tried to copy her. Better. Now, if someone comes at you, what's your instinct? Run. Wrong. Well, not wrong. Running smart if you can, but if you can't... Risa moved fast, grabbed Jane's wrist. Jane jerked back automatically, stumbled. See? You pull away. That's what they expect. Instead, you move in. Close the distance. Take away their leverage. She demonstrated, moving through the motion slowly. Jane tried to follow, brain struggling to override 26 years of flinching and retreating. It felt backward, dangerous, like every instinct she had was screaming at her to do the opposite. Again, Risa said. They drilled it over and over. Basic movements, simple blocks, how to break a grip. Jane's ribs protested every twist, every turn, but she gritted her teeth and pushed through. Risa was relentless but not cruel, correcting without mocking, pushing without breaking. An hour later, Jane was drenched in sweat and shaking with exhaustion. Enough for today, Risa said. You did good, better than I expected. I feel like I got hit by the truck again. Risa grinned. That means you're learning. Go shower, eat something. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Jane stumbled back to the locker room, peeled off the sweat-soaked clothes, and stood under a scalding shower until her muscles stopped screaming. When she emerged, Elena was waiting with fresh clothes and a quiet efficiency that Jane was starting to appreciate. Mr. DeLuca would like you to join him for dinner, Elena said. 7 o'clock, dining room on the main floor. Jane blinked. Dinner? Yes. Don't overthink it. Elena's smile was faint. He doesn't bite, usually. Dinner turned out to be less formal than Jane had feared. The dining room was elegant but not ostentatious. Warm lighting, a table that could seat 12 but was set for 2 at one end. Marco was already there when she arrived, sleeves rolled up, reading something on his phone. He glanced up. Risa says you're stubborn. That's good. Jane sat, still sore. She also probably said, I'm terrible. She said you're raw. There's a difference. Marco poured wine into her glass, then his own. Rawness can be shaped. Terrible is just terrible. While a woman appeared from the kitchen, Jane hadn't even noticed there was a door, and set plates in front of them. Pasta, simple and perfect, with bread and salad. The kind of meal that felt like comfort instead of performance. Eat, Marco said. You burned a lot of calories today. Jane picked up her fork, realized she was starving, and dug in. The food was incredible. She didn't realize she'd made a sound, some kind of involuntary hum of appreciation, until Marco laughed. Good? I haven't had food like this in ever, actually. Get used to it. Rosa's been cooking for me for 10 years. She'll be offended if you don't clean your plate. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Jane kept waiting for the conversation to turn heavy, for Marco to start interrogating her or laying out plans. But he didn't. He just ate, occasionally refilled her wine, and let the quiet settle. Finally, Jane couldn't take it anymore. Why are you being nice to me? Marco set down his fork. You think I'm being nice? Aren't you? I'm being practical. You're no good to me broken. He leaned back in his chair. But if you're asking why I'm not treating you like an asset or a tool, it's because I don't see the point. You're already motivated. You already want what I want. So why make this harder than it needs to be? Most people in your position wouldn't care. I'm not most people. Marco's gaze was steady. And for what it's worth, I don't enjoy hurting people who don't deserve it. Your mother deserves it. You don't. Jane looked down at her plate, throat tight. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. You're doing fine. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Marco picked up his wine glass. But don't let it run the show. You're stronger than you think you are. Everyone keeps saying that, Jane's voice cracked. But I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm one wrong move away from falling apart. Then fall apart. Just do it here, where it's safe, not out there, where she can see it. The honesty of it hit Jane like a punch. She looked up, met Marco's eyes, and saw something there she hadn't expected. Understanding. Not pity, not condescension, just the quiet recognition of someone who knew what it was like to rebuild yourself from wreckage. Did someone do this for you? She asked quietly. Teach you how to be strong? Marco's expression shuddered. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed. My father, not gently, but effectively. Was he like you? Worse. Marco drained his wine. He believed in control through fear. I learned young that fear only works until someone stops being afraid. Then it falls apart. Is that what we're doing? Making my mother afraid? No, we're making her irrelevant. Marco's smile was cold. Fear would give her power. We're taking hers away completely. Jane absorbed that. It felt right. Righteous, even. Her mother had spent decades making Jane feel small, powerless, erased. Turnabout sounded like justice. They finished dinner. Marco walked her back to the elevator himself, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow's going to be harder. Harder how? You'll see. Jane wanted to press, but exhaustion was pulling at her bones. She nodded, stepped into the elevator, and watched Marco's face disappear as the doors slid shut. Back in her room, she collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Her phone, the old, cracked one she'd had before all this, sat on the nightstand. She'd turned it off days ago, too afraid to see what messages might be waiting. But curiosity gnawed at her. Slowly, she reached for it, powered it on. 17 missed calls, all from her mother. 12 texts. Jane opened them with shaking hands. Where are you? Answer your phone. This is unacceptable, Jane. You're making a scene. Call me immediately. The last one was from this morning. I know where you are. This won't end well for you. Jane's stomach clenched. She stared at the screen, reading the words over and over until they blurred. Her mother knew. Of course she knew. And she was angry. A knock at the door made her jump. It's Marco. Jane opened the door. Marco stood there, expression grim, holding a tablet. Your mother just posted this. He turned the screen toward her. It was a social media post, her mother's public account, the one with 50,000 followers who thought she was a saint. The post showed a photo of Jane from years ago, smiling awkwardly at some charity event, and the caption read, My heart is breaking. My daughter has been missing for 3 days. If anyone has seen Jane, please contact me immediately. She's vulnerable, and I'm terrified for her safety. Hashtag help find Jane. Hashtag missing person. The comments were already pouring in, hundreds of them. People offering prayers, sharing the post, calling Jane's disappearance tragic. Jane's hands clenched into fists. She's making herself the victim. Yes, and she's good at it. Marco took the tablet back. This is exactly what I expected. She's building a narrative where you're the lost, troubled daughter and she's the suffering mother. When you turn up alive, she'll claim you were manipulated, kidnapped, brainwashed. What do? We let her play her hand. Let her think she's winning. Marco's smile was sharp. And then we show everyone exactly who she really is. When? Soon, but first we make sure you can handle it. He handed her a card, thick paper, embossed lettering. This is for Dr. Levin, therapist. She works with people who've been through what you've been through. You have an appointment tomorrow at 10. Jane stared at the card. You think I'm crazy? I think you're traumatized. There's a difference. Marco's voice softened. You can't fight her if you're still carrying all the weight she put on you. Dr. Levin will help you put it down. Jane wanted to argue, wanted to say she was fine, that she didn't need help, that she could handle this on her own. But the truth was, she couldn't. The panic attacks, the flinching, the voice in her head that still sounded like her mother, it was all still there, poisoning everything. Okay, she whispered. Good. Marco turned to leave, then paused. Jane, you're doing better than you think. Don't forget that. He left before she could respond. Jane closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a shaky breath. Her phone buzzed. Another text from her mother. You can't hide from me. Jane stared at it. Then slowly, deliberately, she typed out a response. Watch me. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Turned off the phone. Threw it in a drawer. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel the need to apologize. The next morning came too fast. Jane woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, and Elena knocking softly at the door with breakfast and a reminder about the appointment. She ate mechanically, dressed in jeans and a sweater that actually fit, and tried not to think about what therapy would mean. Dr. Levin's office was in a building 20 minutes away, quiet and private. The waiting room was empty. When the door opened, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes gestured Jane inside. "I'm Dr. Levin. You can call me Sarah if you're more comfortable." Jane sat on the couch, hands clasped tight. "Marco sent me." "I know. He filled me in on the basics, but I'd like to hear it from you, in your own words. What brings you here?" And Jane, who'd spent her entire life keeping secrets, who'd learned early that honesty was dangerous, found herself talking. She told Sarah everything: the beatings, the control, the isolation, the insurance policy, the way her mother could make her feel worthless with just a look. Sarah listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, her expression never shifting into pity or horror. Just steady attention. When Jane finally ran out of words, Sarah set down her pen. "What you've described is systematic abuse. Emotional, physical, financial. Your mother has spent your entire life breaking you down so you'd never have the strength to leave. The fact that you're sitting here right now tells me you're stronger than she ever wanted you to be." Jane's throat closed up. "I don't feel strong. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Jane, healing isn't going to be quick. It's not going to be easy. But it's possible. And you've already taken the first step." "What step?" "You chose to live." The words hit Jane square in the chest. She hadn't thought of it that way. But Sarah was right. Somewhere between the rain in Marco's office and shaking his hand, she'd made a choice. Not to disappear. Not to let her mother win. They talked for the full hour. Sarah gave her exercises, grounding techniques for when the panic came, ways to separate her mother's voice from her own thoughts, strategies for rebuilding a sense of self that wasn't defined by fear. "I want to see you twice a week," Sarah said as the session ended. "More if you need it. This is going to get harder before it gets easier, especially when you confront your mother. Marco says it'll be soon. Then we'll prepare you, together." Sarah handed her a card. "My number. Call any time, day or night. I mean that." Jane took the card, gripped it like a lifeline. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're standing on the other side of this." Back at the building, Jane found Marco in his office, phone pressed to his ear, expression dark. He gestured for her to sit. She did, listening to his half of the conversation. "I don't care what she's offering. The answer is no." Pause. "Because I'm not interested in doing business with someone who sells their own daughter." Another pause. "Tell her if she contacts me again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person she is." He ended the call, set the phone down hard. "My mother?" Jane asked. "Her lawyer. Apparently she's willing to negotiate. Wants to know what it'll take to get you back." Marco's laugh was bitter. "Like you're a piece of lost luggage." Jane's hands curled into fists. "What did you say?" "That she can go to hell." Marco rubbed his temples. "She's escalating. That social media post has gone viral. People are looking for you. She's filed a missing person report with the police." "Can they make me go back?" "You're 26. Legally, no. But she's building a case that you're not mentally competent to make your own decisions. That I've manipulated you, kidnapped you, whatever story makes her look sympathetic." Jane felt the panic rising, clawing at her chest. "So what do we do?" Marco's gaze locked onto hers. "We prove she's lying, and we do it in a way she can't refute." "How?" He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was an invitation, thick cardstock, gold lettering. The annual Chicago Children's Foundation Gala. Her mother's charity. The event where she was always the star, the hero, the selfless martyr. "This is in 2 weeks," Marco said. "Your mother will be there. So will 500 of Chicago's wealthiest, most influential people, including several journalists." Jane's heart pounded. "You want me to go?" "I want you to show them who you are. Alive. Unbroken. And then we're going to show them who she is." Marco's smile was razor sharp. "You said you wanted to fight back. This is how we do it." Jane stared at the invitation. 2 weeks. 14 days to become someone her mother wouldn't recognize. Someone who could stand in a room full of strangers and tell the truth without breaking. It felt impossible. But then again, so had surviving this long. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." Marco's expression shifted. Pride, maybe, or something close to it. Then we'd better get you ready. The 2 weeks that followed became a blur of controlled chaos. Jane's days developed a rhythm that felt foreign at first, then gradually necessary. Mornings with Risa in the gym, learning how to move through space like she owned it instead of borrowed it. Afternoons with Sarah, peeling back layers of damage that had calcified over years. Evenings with Marco, drilling her on names and faces and the intricate politics of Chicago's elite social circles. "Who's this?" Marco held up a photograph of a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. Jane squinted at it. "Richard Carmichael, owns 3 hotels downtown. Sits on the board of your mother's charity. Married to someone 20 years younger. Has a gambling problem he thinks nobody knows about." "Good. This one?" Another photo. A woman with sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes. Patricia Weston, real estate developer. Hates my mother, but pretends not to. They compete for the same donors. Marco set down the photos, satisfied. "You're getting better at this. I feel like I'm studying for a test I never signed up for." "You are. Except if you fail this one, your mother wins." He poured coffee from the pot Elena had brought earlier, slid a cup across to Jane. "These people? They're vultures. They'll smile at your mother while she's useful and tear her apart the second she's not. We just need to give them a reason." Jane wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "And you're sure this will work? That they'll actually believe me over her?" "They won't have a choice. Not when they see the evidence." Marco opened his laptop, turned it toward her. The screen showed financial records, emails, documents Jane had never seen before. "My people have been digging. Your mother's been running this charity like her personal piggy bank for 7 years. Ghost employees, inflated expenses, donations that disappear into shell companies. It's all here." Jane scrolled through the files, stomach twisting. How did she get away with this for so long? Because people wanted to believe in her. She's charming, charismatic. She tells a good story about helping children while looking perfect in a gown. Marco's voice went hard. But charm only works until someone shows you the receipts. And you're going to show them at the gala. "We are. Together." Marco closed the laptop. "But only if you're ready. If you can stand in that room and not fall apart when she looks at you." Jane met his eyes. "I won't fall apart." "You say that now. But she knows how to get to you. She's had 26 years of practice." "Then I'll have to be better than her practice." Jane set down her cup, jaw tight. "I'm not the same person she handed over 2 weeks ago. You made sure of that." Something flickered across Marco's face. Pride, maybe. Or concern. "Just remember, this isn't about revenge. It's about justice. There's a difference." "Is there?" Jane heard the bitterness in her own voice. "Because from where I'm sitting, they look pretty similar." Marco leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Revenge is personal. It's satisfying, but it burns out fast. Justice is permanent. It rebuilds what was broken." He paused. "Your mother took everything from you. We're not just taking it back, we're making sure she can never do it to anyone else." Jane absorbed that. He was right, as usual. This was bigger than her pain, bigger than the scars her mother had left. There were other victims out there, people who'd trusted the charity, donors who'd been lied to, maybe even other girls like her who'd been used and discarded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Justice, then." The days bled together. Jane's ribs healed enough that she could move without wincing. Her sessions with Risa became less about survival and more about confidence, each punch and block building something solid in her chest where fear used to live. Sarah taught her how to recognize when her mother's voice was speaking through her own thoughts, how to silence it, how to build new patterns that didn't revolve around making herself small. And through it all, Marco was there, not hovering, not controlling, just present. He'd appear in the gym sometimes to watch her train, offer quiet corrections when her stance faltered. He'd sit across from her at dinner and let her vent about the frustration of unlearning 26 years of conditioning. He never asked her to be grateful, never demanded anything in return. It made her trust him in a way she hadn't trusted anyone before. 5 days before the gala, Elena appeared in Jane's room with 3 garment bags. "Mister, DeLuca had these made for you," Elena said, hanging them in the closet. "For the event." Jane unzipped the first bag and felt her breath catch. The dress inside was midnight blue, elegant and understated, Nothing like the flashy cocktail dresses her mother used to force her into for charity events. This was sophisticated, powerful, the kind of dress that made a statement without screaming. "It's beautiful," Jane whispered. "Try it on. Make sure it fits." Jane slipped into the dress, and it fit like it had been painted onto her body. Not tight, just perfect. She caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The bruises had faded to yellow shadows. Her hair had been trimmed by a stylist Elena had brought in, shaped into something intentional instead of neglected. She looked like someone who mattered. "He has good taste," Elena said, adjusting the shoulder seam slightly. "Always has." Jane turned, studying herself from different angles. Why is he doing all this? Really? Elena's expression softened. "You'd have to ask him, but if I had to guess, you reminded him of someone, or maybe of himself, once." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle. "Mr. DeLuca doesn't help people often, but when he does, he commits completely. You're lucky." "I don't feel lucky." "You're alive, aren't you? And you're about to destroy the woman who tried to kill you. That's not luck. That's survival." Elena stepped back, assessing. "The dress is perfect. I'll have the shoes sent up." After Elena left, Jane stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The woman staring back at her looked capable, strong. Nothing like the broken girl who'd been dragged through the rain 2 weeks ago. But underneath the dress and the styled hair, Jane could still feel the fear coiled tight in her stomach. What if she froze when she saw her mother? What if all this preparation crumbled the second they were in the same room? A knock interrupted her spiral. "It's me," Marco called. Jane opened the door. Marco stood there in his usual expensive suit, but something about his expression was different, softer. "Elena said the dress fits." "It does. Thank you." He waved that off. "I need you to come with me. There's something you should see." He led her down to a floor she'd never been to before, past a security door that required both a key card and a fingerprint. Beyond it was a room that looked like something out of a spy movie. Screens on every wall, computers humming, 2 people working at stations who glanced up when they entered. "This is where we've been building the case," Marco said. "Everything we're going to show at the gala. I want you to see it first. Make sure you're ready." One of the tech guys, lanky, early 20s, with headphones around his neck, pulled up a file on the main screen. It was a video compilation. The footage started with news clips of Jane's mother at various charity events, smiling for cameras, accepting awards, giving speeches about helping vulnerable children. Then it shifted. Bank records appeared, highlighted to show the discrepancies. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. Emails where she discussed moving money, hiding expenses, paying people off. Then came the photos. Jane as a child, skinny and bruised, school photos where you could see the damage if you looked close enough. Medical records that had been sealed but somehow Marco's people had accessed. Each one documented years of abuse that had been carefully hidden, explained away, ignored by everyone who should have protected her. The final section was the insurance policy itself, blown up on screen with annotations explaining exactly what it meant. The payout, the beneficiary, the timing. When it ended, the room was silent except for the hum of electronics. Jane's hands were shaking. "You got all of this?" "Most of it was already out there, just buried. We connected the dots." Marco nodded to the tech guy. "This will play on every screen in the ballroom, 4 minutes. Long enough to make the point, short enough that nobody can look away. She'll deny everything." "Of course she will, but denial doesn't work when the evidence is that clear." Marco's voice was steady. "The media will pick it up. The police will have to investigate. Her donors will disappear. Everything she's built will collapse." Jane stared at the blank screen. This was it. This was the weapon they'd been building, and it was devastating. "I want to add something," she said suddenly. Marco raised an eyebrow. "What?" "A statement. From me. At the end." Jane turned to face him. "I want to look into the camera and tell them exactly what she did. In my own words." "Jane, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Her voice was firm. "You said this is about justice. Justice means the victims get to speak. I need to speak." Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, we'll film it tomorrow. But we do it right. You get one take. No do-overs. So you'd better be ready. I will be. That night, Jane sat at the desk in her room and wrote out what she wanted to say. She revised it a dozen times, crossing out anything that sounded too angry, too broken, too much like the girl her mother had tried to create. What remained was simple, honest, devastating in its clarity. The next morning, they filmed it in Marco's office. Just her, sitting in a chair, facing the camera. No makeup to hide the fading bruises, no script to read from. Just Jane, speaking directly to the lens like she was talking to every person who'd ever believed her mother's lies. My name is Jane Whitmore, she began, voice steady. And the woman you know as Charlotte Whitmore, philanthropist, charity director, advocate for children, is the same woman who beat me, controlled me, and sold me to a stranger because she thought I was worth more dead than alive. Everything you've seen tonight is true. Every document, every record, every photo. This is who she really is, and I'm done being silent about it. When it was over, the room was quiet. The camera guy mumbled something about it being powerful and slipped out. Marco stood with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. Too much? Jane asked. No. It's perfect. Marco's voice was rough. She won't recover from this. Good. Jane stood, legs unsteady. Because I don't want her to. 3 days before the gala, Jane's mother made her move. It happened in the afternoon. Jane was in the gym with Risa working through combinations when Elena appeared in the doorway looking tense. Jane, you need to come upstairs. Now. Something in her tone made Jane's stomach drop. She followed Elena to Marco's office, where he stood at the window with his phone pressed to his ear, shoulders tight with tension. I don't care what kind of warrant you think you have. You're not coming in here without... He stopped, listened. Then I'll have my lawyer meet you at the precinct. He ended the call, turned to face Jane. Your mother went to the police, told them I kidnapped you. They want to do a welfare check. Jane's blood went cold. Can they do that? Technically, yes, but I'm not letting them in without a fight. You're an adult. You came here willingly. They have no cause. Marco's jaw tightened. But this is her play. She's trying to force your hand, make you choose between going back to her or making this a legal battle. I'm not going back. The words came out fierce. I don't care what they say. I'm not going back to her. Then we handle this now. You're going to talk to the police, tell them the truth, that you're here by choice, that you're safe, that she's the one who hurt you. Marco moved closer. Can you do that? Without breaking? Jane thought about the past 2 weeks, the training, the therapy, the slow, painful process of building herself into someone who could survive this. Yes, good, because she's counting on you falling apart. We're going to prove her wrong. An hour later, 2 police officers showed up. Marco met them in a conference room with his lawyer present, and Jane sat across from them with her hands folded on the table, determined not to let them see her fear. The older officer, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, studied Jane carefully. Miss Whitmore, we received a report that you're being held here against your will. Is that true? No. Jane's voice didn't waver. I'm here because I choose to be. Your mother seems to think otherwise. She's very concerned about you. Jane almost laughed. My mother is concerned about her reputation, not me. The younger officer leaned forward. She showed us posts you made on social media, said you've been out of contact for weeks. That's not normal behavior for someone who's safe. What's not normal is a mother who beats her daughter and then files a missing person report to cover it up. Jane pushed up her sleeves, revealing the fading bruises. She did this, and she did a lot worse over the years. You want to know why I'm here? Because Marco DeLuca offered me safety when the woman who gave birth to me tried to have me killed. The officers exchanged glances. The woman pulled out a notepad. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. And I have proof. Medical records, witness statements, financial documents showing the insurance policy she took out on my life. Jane met the woman's eyes. Check my history. Talk to the doctors who treated me as a kid. You'll see the pattern. The interview lasted another 20 minutes. By the end, both officers looked uncomfortable, and the older woman handed Jane a card. If you need anything, call this number. Victim Services. They can help. I'm getting help. Here. Jane glanced at Marco. I'm exactly where I need to be. After they left, Marco's lawyer nodded approvingly. You handled that well. They won't be back. But Jane knew better. Her mother wouldn't stop with the police. She'd try something else, something worse. She was right. The next morning, Jane woke to her phone buzzing. She'd gotten a new one, unlisted number. Only a handful of people had it. The text was from an unknown sender. You think you're safe? You think he can protect you? You're still my daughter. You'll always be mine. Jane's hands went cold. She showed it to Marco immediately. His expression went dark. She's escalating, trying to scare you before the gala. It's working. Jane hated how small her voice sounded. Marco took the phone, forwarded the message to someone, then handed it back. Fear is her last card. Don't give her the satisfaction of playing it. He gripped her shoulder briefly. One more day. That's all you need to survive. One more day, and this is over. Jane nodded, but the text haunted her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept imagining her mother's face, the way she'd look when the video played, when the room turned against her. Would she crumble? Would she fight? Or would she find some way to twist it, to make herself the victim again? The morning of the gala, Jane woke before dawn. She went through her routine mechanically: shower, coffee, breathing exercises Sarah had taught her. Risa showed up to run her through one final session, more about centering than fighting. You've got this, Risa said as they finished. Just remember everything we worked on. Stand tall. Don't apologize. Own the space. And if I freeze, you won't. But if you do, you know how to breathe through it. You know how to come back. Risa gripped her shoulder. You're tougher than you think, Jane. Go show them. Elena came to help her get ready in the afternoon. The dress, the shoes, the understated jewelry Marco had chosen. Hair pulled back in a way that showed her face instead of hiding it. Minimal makeup, just enough to look polished, not enough to look like she was performing. When Jane looked in the mirror this time, she saw someone she almost didn't recognize. Confident, dangerous, ready. Marco was waiting in the hallway when she emerged. He wore a black tuxedo that probably cost more than a car, looking every inch the crime lord he was. But when he saw her, something in his expression shifted. You look... He stopped, started again. You're going to walk in there and everyone's going to know exactly who you are. That's the plan, right? Yeah, but I don't think you realize how powerful you look right now. He offered his arm. Ready? Jane took it, felt the solid warmth of him beside her. As I'll ever be. The gala was held at the Grand Marquis Hotel, one of the most expensive venues in Chicago. They arrived fashionably late, after most of the guests were already inside. The lobby was full of people in designer clothes, air thick with expensive perfume, and the murmur of elite conversation. Jane felt every eye turned toward them as they entered. Marco kept his hand at the small of her back, a steady pressure that said, I'm here. They moved through the crowd, and Jane recognized faces from the photos she'd studied. Richard Carmichael near the bar, Patricia Weston holding court by the windows. And there, at the center of it all, surrounded by admirers and journalists, was Charlotte Whitmore. Jane's mother looked exactly as she always did, elegant in a cream-colored gown, diamonds at her throat, smile perfect and practiced. She was mid-conversation with a reporter when her gaze landed on Jane. The smile froze. For just a second, shock flashed across Charlotte's face. Then it was gone, replaced by something harder. Their eyes met across the room. Charlotte excused herself from the reporter and began making her way toward them. Jane's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to make herself invisible, but she forced herself to stand still, to breathe, to remember who she'd become in the past 2 weeks. Jane. Her mother's voice was sugary sweet, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Thank goodness. I've been so worried about you. She reached out like she was going to embrace her daughter. Jane stepped back just out of reach. Don't touch me. Charlotte's eyes went cold, but her smile never wavered. Darling, I know you've been through a difficult time, but we should talk privately. This isn't the place. No. Jane's voice was steady. We're not going anywhere. And we're not talking privately. Anything you have to say to me, you can say right here. A hush was spreading through the nearby crowd. People were starting to notice the confrontation, phones coming out, cameras turning their way. Charlotte's smile tightened. Jane, you're clearly not well. This man has manipulated you. Marco saved my life. You tried to end it. Jane felt Marco's hand press gently against her back, grounding her. I know about the insurance policy. I know you sent me to him expecting him to kill me. I know everything. Charlotte's mask slipped for just a moment, fury flashing in her eyes. Then she laughed, the sound light and practiced. That's absurd. You've clearly been fed lies. The only person who's been lying here is you. Jane's voice carried now, stronger with every word. And in about 30 seconds, everyone in this room is going to know exactly what kind of person you really are. Charlotte opened her mouth to respond, but the lights dimmed. The screens positioned around the ballroom flickered to life, and the video began to play. Jane watched her mother's face as the evidence unspooled across every screen, watched the color drain from her cheeks, watched her eyes go wide with panic as the bank records appeared, as the photos of Jane's childhood injuries filled the room, as the insurance policy was displayed for everyone to see. The ballroom had gone completely silent. When Jane's recorded statement began, her face filling the screens, her voice calm and clear, Charlotte finally moved. She turned toward the nearest screen, then the next, looking for an escape that didn't exist. Turn it off, she hissed at someone. Turn it off now! But nobody moved. Everyone was watching. The journalists, the donors, the board members, all the people who'd believed in her, celebrated her, given her power. The video ended. The screens went dark. In the silence that followed, Charlotte Whitmore stood alone in the center of the ballroom, her perfect facade finally shattered. And Jane, for the first time in her entire life, wasn't afraid anymore. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then someone dropped a glass. The sound of crystal shattering on marble echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot, and suddenly everyone was moving at once. Charlotte lurched forward, reaching for the nearest journalist. This is fabricated, all of it. That man, she pointed a shaking finger at Marco. He's a criminal. He coerced her. I have copies of everything, Marco said calmly, his voice cutting through her panic. Financial records authenticated by 3 separate forensic accountants. Medical records subpoenaed from 4 different hospitals. The insurance policy filed with your signature, dated and notarized. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket, held it up. Any journalist who wants the complete file can have it, free of charge. A dozen hands shot up immediately. Charlotte's face went from pale to crimson. You can't do this. I'll sue you for defamation, for slander, for telling the truth? Jane's voice was quiet, but it carried. She stepped forward, away from Marco's protective presence, standing on her own. You can try, but we both know what discovery will reveal. Her mother's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment Jane saw something there that almost looked like desperation. Jane, please. You don't understand what you're doing. I'm your mother. I love you. Everything I did was... Don't. The word came out hard. Don't you dare say you did it for me. You did it for yourself. You've always done everything for yourself. Charlotte's expression twisted into something ugly. The mask was gone completely now, stripped away by panic and rage. You ungrateful little bitch! After everything I gave you, you gave me nothing but scars. Jane's voice didn't shake, not anymore. And I'm done carrying them for you. A flash went off. Then another. The journalists were documenting everything, phones and cameras capturing Charlotte's meltdown in real time. Jane could see it happening, the story shifting, the narrative crumbling. Every word her mother spoke was another nail in her own coffin. Richard Carmichael pushed through the crowd, face red with fury. Charlotte, is this true? Have you been stealing from the foundation? Richard, I can explain. Can you explain $2 million in offshore accounts? Patricia Weston appeared beside him, holding her phone up. Because I'm looking at the transfers right now. My accountant just sent me the breakdown. Her smile was sharp. Interesting how much of our donated money ended up in the Cayman Islands. Charlotte's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She looked around the room, searching for allies, for anyone who might defend her. But the faces staring back were all the same. Shock, disgust, betrayal. The people who'd celebrated her an hour ago were already stepping away, distancing themselves from the wreckage. This isn't over, Charlotte hissed, turning back to Jane. You think you've won? You think destroying me makes you strong? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. And when he gets bored of you, she gestured wildly at Marco. When he throws you away like the trash you are, you'll have nowhere to go. No one will want you. The words hit exactly where they were meant to, finding all the old wounds, the places that still ached. Jane felt the familiar panic starting to rise, the voice in her head that said, maybe her mother was right. Maybe she really was worthless. Maybe... Marco's hand found hers. Warm, steady, real. And just like that, the panic stopped. Jane looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw not the towering figure of her childhood, but a small, vicious woman whose power had always come from making other people feel smaller. Without that power, without the fear she'd cultivated so carefully, Charlotte Whitmore was just pathetic. You're right about one thing, Jane said quietly. I was nothing. You made sure of that. But I'm not anymore. And you? She let her gaze sweep over the ruined woman in front of her. You're exactly what you've always been. Just now everyone else can see it too. Charlotte opened her mouth, but whatever she'd been about to say was cut off by a new voice from the edge of the crowd. Charlotte Whitmore? Two men in suits pushed through, badges visible on their belts. Detectives. Jane recognized the older one from the photos Marco had shown her, someone who owed him a favor, who'd agreed to be on standby tonight. We have some questions about financial irregularities at the Children's Foundation. You'll need to come with us. I'm not going anywhere. Charlotte's voice rose to a shriek. This is harassment. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, the detective said calmly. I'd suggest using it. They weren't arresting her. Not yet. Just bringing her in for questioning. But the crowd didn't know that. All they saw was Charlotte Whitmore being escorted out of her own gala by police, her perfect facade shattered beyond repair. Jane watched her mother disappear through the ballroom doors and felt something release in her chest. Not relief, exactly. More like the absence of a weight she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. Marco's hand was still in hers. She looked up at him and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You okay? He asked quietly. I don't know yet. Honest? Ask me tomorrow. The ballroom erupted into chaos around them. Journalists shouting questions, board members arguing in tight clusters, guests streaming toward the exits. Someone killed the music. The gala had officially imploded. Patricia Weston materialized in front of them, eyes bright with calculation. Mr. DeLuca, Miss Whitmore. That was quite a performance. It wasn't a performance, Jane said. It was the truth. Even better. Patricia's smile was all teeth. The Foundation's board will need new leadership. Someone with actual integrity this time. I'm putting your name forward, Jane. If you're interested. Jane blinked. I don't know anything about running a charity. You know what it's like to need help and not get it. That's more qualification than most of these vultures. Patricia glanced around the room with obvious distaste. Think about it. We'll talk next week. She swept away before Jane could respond. Marco steered her toward a side exit, away from the press of bodies and cameras. They slipped into a quiet corridor and Jane finally let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking, her legs felt like water. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving her hollow. I need to sit down, she managed. Marco found a bench, helped her onto it. She put her head between her knees, trying to remember Sarah's breathing exercises. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out. You did good, Marco said, sitting beside her. Better than good. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's normal. You just went to war with the person who's haunted you your entire life. Your body's processing that. Jane laughed, the sound shaky. Is that your professional opinion? I've been in a few wars. You get used to the aftermath. His voice was gentle. Just breathe, let it happen. She sat there for a long time, Marco a solid presence beside her, while the chaos continued in the ballroom beyond. Eventually her hands stopped shaking. Her breathing evened out. The world stopped spinning quite so fast. What happens now? She asked. The police will investigate. The Foundation's board will launch their own audit. The media will tear into her for weeks. Marco's tone was matter-of-fact. Your mother's life as she knew it is over. Everything she built is going to collapse. And me? That's up to you. Marco turned to look at her. You're free, Jane. Actually free. You can do whatever you want now. The concept felt foreign. Freedom, choice, a future that wasn't dictated by someone else's cruelty. Jane had spent so long surviving that she'd never learned how to actually live. I don't know what I want, she admitted. Then figure it out. You've got time. Marco stood, offered his hand. But right now we should get out of here before the press finds us. They left through a service entrance, avoiding the cluster of reporters and cameras that had gathered at the front. Marco's car was waiting, engine running. They slid into the back seat and the driver pulled away from the hotel, leaving the wreckage behind. Jane watched the city pass by the window. Chicago at night, all lights and shadows and possibility. She'd lived here her entire life, but it had never felt like home, just a cage she couldn't escape. Now, sitting in the back of Marco DeLuca's car with her mother's empire crumbling behind her, she wondered what it might feel like to actually belong somewhere. Thank you, she said quietly. For all of this, she gestured vaguely. Everything. Marco's expression was unreadable. Don't thank me yet. The hard part's just starting. What do you mean? Your mother's going to fight back. She's got lawyers, connections, money she's hidden away. This isn't over just because she had a bad night. He met her eyes. Are you ready for that? For the long game? Jane thought about it, really thought about it. Her mother was vicious when cornered. That much was true. She'd lie, manipulate, play victim. She'd try every trick she'd ever learned to claw her way back to respectability. It would be ugly, prolonged, exhausting. But Jane wasn't the same person who'd walked into Marco's office 2 weeks ago. She'd learned how to stand up straight, how to throw a punch, how to look someone in the eye and refuse to flinch. She'd learned that she was stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever given her credit for. Yeah, she said, I'm ready. The car pulled up to Marco's building. They rode the elevator in silence, and when the doors opened on her floor, Marco walked her to her room. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow's going to be insane. Press requests, legal calls, probably a few dozen people trying to get a piece of you now that you're the story. Jane's stomach twisted. I don't want to be the story. Too late. You already are. But his tone was kind. Elena will handle the phone. You just focus on yourself. Talk to Sarah. Process what happened tonight. Don't let anyone rush you into decisions. What about you? What are you going to do? Marco's smile was faint. Make sure your mother's lawyers can't find any loopholes. Make sure the evidence is airtight. Make sure she actually pays for what she did. He paused. And make sure you stay safe. She's dangerous when she's desperate. You think she'd try something? I think she's lost everything that mattered to her. People in that position make stupid choices. His expression hardened. But she won't get near you. I'll make sure of that. Jane wanted to argue, to say she didn't need protection, that she could handle herself. But the truth was she felt safer knowing Marco was watching her back. She'd learned to trust him in a way she'd never trusted anyone. Okay, she said. I'll be careful. Good. Marco turned to leave, then stopped. Jane, what you did tonight, standing up to her like that, most people couldn't have done it. You should be proud. He left before she could respond. Jane went into her room, closed the door, and leaned against it. She should feel triumphant, victorious. But all she felt was tired, bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that made even changing out of the dress feel like too much effort. She managed it eventually, trading the elegant gown for soft pajamas, washing the makeup off her face. In the mirror, she looked like herself again. Just Jane. Not the polished version she'd been at the gala, not the broken girl from 2 weeks ago. Something in between. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Saw the news. Call me if you need to talk. Anytime. Jane smiled despite everything. She didn't call. Talking felt impossible right now, but she sent back a simple thank you and felt better for it. Sleep should have been impossible, but the moment Jane's head hit the pillow, she was out. Dreamless, heavy sleep that lasted until late morning when Elena knocked with coffee, and the warning that Jane's phone was already ringing off the hook. Reporters, Elena said, setting down the tray. Lawyers, people claiming to be your relatives. I've been screening them all. Any I actually need to talk to? Not unless you want to. Mr. DeLuca says to take the day. Rest. The world can wait. But the world, as it turned out, had other plans. Jane was halfway through her coffee when Marco appeared, expression grim. "We have a problem." Her stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Your mother posted bail an hour ago, and she's calling a press conference for this afternoon." He handed her his phone. The screen showed a news alert. Charlotte Whitmore was planning to make a statement claiming she'd been framed, that her daughter had been manipulated by organized crime, that the whole thing was a conspiracy. Jane's hands went cold. She's going to lie. She's going to make herself the victim. Of course she is. It's the only play she has left. Marco took his phone back. "Question is, do we respond, or do we let her dig her own grave? What do you think we should do?" "I think she's counting on you staying silent, on you hiding. She's going to paint you as unstable, controlled, not credible." His eyes were sharp. "So I think you should show up. Be visible. Remind everyone who the real victim is here." Jane's pulse kicked up. The thought of facing cameras, reporters, her mother's accusations, it made her want to crawl under the bed and never come out. But she'd come this far. Backing down now would undo everything. "Where's the press conference?" "The Regency Hotel, noon." Marco checked his watch. "We've got 2 hours. Then we'd better get ready." This time, Jane chose her own outfit. Simple black pants, a white blouse, hair pulled back. Nothing flashy. She looked professional, composed, like someone who had nothing to hide. Elena appeared with a makeup artist who covered the last traces of bruising, and by the time Jane looked in the mirror again, she barely recognized the confident woman staring back. Marco met her downstairs with Risa and 2 other security people Jane had seen around but never spoken to. "You don't have to speak," he said as they headed to the cars. "Just be there. Let them see you. That's enough." But Jane knew it wasn't enough. Not really. Her mother was about to stand in front of cameras and lie through her teeth. Someone needed to counter that narrative, and who better than the daughter she'd tried to erase? The Regency was swarmed with media when they arrived. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions. Marco's security cleared a path, and they made it inside without Jane having to answer anything. The press conference was being held in a ballroom smaller than the one from last night, but still packed with journalists. Charlotte was already there, sitting at a table on a raised platform, flanked by 2 expensive-looking lawyers. She'd clearly hired a stylist too. She looked softer than usual, more maternal, with barely any makeup and her hair styled simply. The grieving mother, the wronged woman. It was a performance, and she was playing it perfectly. When Charlotte saw Jane enter, her expression flickered, just for a second. Then the mask was back. Jane and Marco took seats in the back, refusing to be invisible. Several cameras swung their way. Jane kept her face neutral, hands folded in her lap, and watched her mother prepare to lie. Charlotte's lead attorney stood first, reading from a prepared statement. The usual legal language, denying all allegations, claiming the evidence was fabricated, promising lawsuits against Marco DeLuca for defamation and harassment. Then Charlotte herself took the microphone. "I want to start by saying how much I love my daughter," she began, voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "Jane has struggled with mental health issues for years. I've done everything I could to help her, to protect her, to give her the care she needed. But recently she fell under the influence of someone who saw her vulnerability as an opportunity." Jane's jaw clenched. She felt Marco's hand find hers under the table, a silent reminder to stay calm. "The man sitting in this room right now, Marco DeLuca, is a known criminal," Charlotte continued. "He runs one of the most dangerous organizations in Chicago, and for reasons I don't fully understand, he targeted my daughter. He manipulated her, convinced her that I was the enemy. And now he's using her as a weapon against me." A reporter raised a hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, what about the financial records? The evidence of embezzlement?" "Fabricated," one of the lawyers interjected smoothly. "We have our own forensic accountants reviewing the foundation's books. We're confident we'll prove these accusations are baseless." "And the insurance policy?" another reporter called out. Charlotte's eyes went hard for just a moment before softening again. "A standard policy taken out for estate planning purposes. Nothing sinister. The fact that it's being twisted into something malicious just shows how far these people will go to destroy me." Jane couldn't take it anymore. She stood, the movement drawing every camera in the room. Charlotte's face went pale. "Jane, sweetheart, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Jane's voice carried across the ballroom. Because everything you just said is a lie. The room erupted. Journalists shouting questions, cameras flashing. Charlotte's lawyers tried to regain control, but it was too late. Jane had the floor now. I don't have mental health issues, Jane said clearly. What I have is PTSD from 26 years of abuse at the hands of the woman sitting on that stage. What I have is documentation of every broken bone, every bruise, every time she put me in the hospital and convinced the doctors it was an accident. Jane, please. Charlotte stood, reaching out like she was trying to comfort a hysterical child. Don't touch me. Don't pretend you care. Jane's hands were shaking, but her voice stayed steady. You sent me to Marco DeLuca expecting him to kill me so you could collect $2 million. That's not love. That's not protection. That's attempted murder. One of the lawyers stepped forward. Miss Whitmore, you're clearly upset. Perhaps we should take a break. I'm not upset. I'm done being silent. Jane turned to address the room full of reporters. My mother is a criminal. She's stolen from the charity she runs. She's abused her daughter for decades. And now she's standing up here playing victim because she got caught. Don't let her fool you. She's very good at performing, but that's all it is, a performance. Charlotte's mask cracked completely. You ungrateful... She caught herself, forced the syrupy tone back. Jane, I know you're confused. That man has poisoned your mind against me. But I'm still your mother. I'll always love you, no matter what he's made you believe. Marco didn't make me believe anything. You did. Every time you hit me, every time you told me I was worthless, every time you made me feel like I deserved the pain. Jane's voice broke on the last word, but she pushed through. The only thing Marco did was give me a place to heal and teach me that I didn't have to live in fear anymore. She turned and walked out of the ballroom, Marco and his security team falling into step around her. Behind them, the press conference dissolved into chaos. Reporters shouting questions, Charlotte's lawyers trying to restore order, cameras capturing every second of the meltdown. Outside, Jane made it to the car before her legs gave out. She collapsed into the seat, gasping for air, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a freight train. Marco slid in beside her. Breathe, you're okay. Just breathe. I couldn't. She was lying, and I know. You did the right thing. His voice was calm, grounding. You told the truth. That's all you needed to do. Jane focused on breathing. In, out, in, out. Slowly, the panic receded. When she could think clearly again, she looked at Marco. What happens now? Now? Marco's smile was grim. Now we let the truth do its work. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Within hours, every news outlet in Chicago was running the story. Video of Jane's confrontation with her mother went viral. The foundation's board called an emergency meeting and suspended Charlotte indefinitely. 3 major donors publicly withdrew their support. The police announced they were opening a formal investigation into the embezzlement charges. And through it all, Jane stayed in Marco's building, watching the empire her mother had built collapse in real time. Sarah came by that evening for an emergency session. They talked for 2 hours about processing trauma, about confronting abusers, about the strange emptiness that came after finally getting justice. It helped. Not completely, but enough that Jane could sleep that night without nightmares. The next morning, Elena brought news that Charlotte's lawyers had reached out. They wanted to talk settlement. What kind of settlement? Jane asked. Marco, sitting across from her at breakfast, looked disgusted. The kind where she admits no wrongdoing but agrees to stay away from you permanently. In exchange, you don't pursue criminal charges. Jane's coffee went cold in her hands. She wants me to let her walk. She wants to avoid prison. Yes. Marco's tone made it clear what he thought of that idea. What do you think I should do? I think that's your call, not mine. Marco leaned back. If you want her in prison, we can make that happen. The evidence is solid, but it'll mean a trial. Months, maybe years of legal battles. You'll have to testify. Relive everything. Face her in court. Jane thought about that. Thought about sitting in a courtroom while her mother's lawyers tried to tear her apart. Thought about the media circus, the scrutiny, the endless questions. She'd just gotten free. Did she really want to spend the next year of her life chained to this fight? What happens if I take the settlement? She goes away. Legally barred from contacting you. The foundation fires her. She loses her reputation, her career, most of her money. She doesn't go to prison, but her life as she knew it is over. Jane stared into her coffee. Prison felt like justice, but so did knowing her mother would spend the rest of her life watching everything she'd built turn to ash. Maybe that was punishment enough. Maybe Jane didn't need to destroy herself in the process of destroying her. "I'll take the settlement," she said quietly, "but I want one more thing. Name it." I want her to admit what she did, in writing. A full confession. Abuse. Embezzlement. The insurance policy. All of it. And if she ever tries to hurt anyone else, that confession goes public. Marco's smile was sharp. "I'll have my lawyers draft it." The settlement was finalized within a week. Charlotte Whitmore signed a 20-page document detailing every crime she'd committed, every lie she'd told, every time she'd raised a hand to her daughter. She gave up control of the foundation. She agreed to a permanent restraining order. She surrendered nearly all of her liquid assets to pay back what she'd stolen. And in return, Jane agreed not to press charges. It felt anticlimactic. After everything, after all the fear and pain and rage, it came down to signatures on paper. But when Jane saw her mother's name scrawled at the bottom of that confession, she felt something release in her chest. It was over. Really, truly over. Charlotte Whitmore's life imploded in the weeks that followed, exactly as Marco had predicted. The scandal consumed her. Former friends refused her calls. The charity world blacklisted her. She tried once to release a statement claiming coercion, but Jane's lawyers shut it down immediately, threatening to release the confession. After that, Charlotte went silent. Disappeared from public life entirely. Jane heard through Marco's network that her mother had left Chicago, some small town in another state where nobody knew her name, starting over from nothing, just like she'd always forced Jane to do. The irony wasn't lost on her, but Jane wasn't thinking about her mother anymore. For the first time in her life, she was thinking about herself, about what she wanted, who she wanted to become. The answer surprised her. 3 months after the settlement, Jane stood in front of an empty warehouse on the south side of Chicago and tried to see what it could become. The building was a disaster. Broken windows, water damage, decades of neglect turning the interior into something that looked more like a crime scene than a future. But it was hers. Bought with the settlement money her mother had been forced to pay back. Every dollar a small piece of justice. "You're sure about this?" Marco asked, standing beside her with his hands in his pockets, surveying the wreckage with a critical eye. "No," Jane admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." She'd been thinking about Patricia Weston's offer to join the foundation board, had even attended a few meetings, sat through presentations about fundraising and donor relations and all the bureaucratic machinery that kept charities running. It was important work, necessary work. But sitting in those conference rooms, listening to people talk about helping vulnerable women in abstract terms, Jane had realized something. She didn't want to manage programs from a distance. She wanted to build something real, something that would have saved her if it had existed when she needed it. A shelter. Not the kind with institutional beds and fluorescent lighting and rules that felt like punishment. Something different. A place where women escaping abuse could actually heal, could learn to be whole again, could discover they were worth more than what had been done to them. The idea had taken root during one of her sessions with Sarah. They'd been talking about what healing actually looked like, and Jane had mentioned how Marco's building had felt like sanctuary, the safety of it. The way Elena had appeared with food and clothes without Jane having to ask. The gym where Risa had taught her to fight back. The therapy sessions that had helped her separate her mother's voice from her own thoughts. What if other women could have that? Jane had said. Not just a bed and a social worker's phone number. Actual support. People who understand. Sarah had smiled. Then you should build it. So here she was, staring at a warehouse that looked like it should be condemned, trying to imagine it full of life and hope and second chances. Marco was already pulling out his phone. I know a contractor. He owes me a favor, can have a crew here tomorrow to assess the damage. Marco, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He glanced at her. You're doing something good here. Let me help. Jane had learned not to argue when he used that tone. Over the past 3 months, she'd learned a lot about Marco DeLuca, that underneath the crime lord exterior was someone who understood survival, who respected strength, who kept his word no matter what it cost him. She'd learned that he was loyal to the point of stubbornness, that he valued competence over sentiment, and that he had a surprising soft spot for lost causes. She'd also learned that she trusted him more than she'd ever trusted anyone, which was terrifying and comforting in equal measure. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." Marco made a call. Within an hour, a man in work boots and a hard hat showed up to walk through the space. Jane followed, taking notes, trying not to feel overwhelmed by the scope of what she was attempting. The contractor, a gruff older man named Frank who spoke in clipped sentences, pointed out structural issues, electrical problems, plumbing that would need to be completely replaced. "It's a lot of work," Frank said finally, "but the bones are good. You've got solid foundation, good ceiling height. Could be something special if you do it right." "How long?" 6 months if you want it done fast. 8 if you want it done properly." Frank pulled out a battered notebook, started sketching rough plans. "You'll need permits, inspections, the whole bureaucratic mess. But it's doable." Jane felt something spark in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or purpose. "Let's do it properly." Frank nodded, already calculating numbers. "I'll have an estimate for you by Friday." After he left, Jane and Marco stood in what would eventually be the main common area, surrounded by construction dust and peeling paint and the ghosts of what the building used to be. "You're really doing this," Marco said. Not a question. "Yeah, I really am." Jane turned to face him. "I know it's crazy. I know I have no experience running anything like this. But I have to try. If I don't—" She stopped, searching for the right words. "If I don't do something with what happened to me, then it was all just pain with no point. This way, maybe it means something." Marco's expression softened in a way she rarely saw. "It already means something. You survived. That's enough." "Not for me. Not anymore." Jane looked around the empty warehouse. "I want to build something, leave something behind that's better than what I found." "Then you will." He said it like it was fact, like her success was inevitable. Jane wished she had that kind of certainty. But maybe that was what faith looked like. Someone believing in you when you couldn't quite believe in yourself yet. The months that followed were a controlled chaos of permits and construction and endless logistical nightmares. Jane threw herself into it completely, learning as she went. She hired an architect who specialized in trauma-informed design. She consulted with social workers, therapists, survivors of domestic violence. She visited other shelters, took notes on what worked and what didn't, and slowly began to shape a vision of what her place would be. Not a warehouse anymore. A home. 12 private rooms, each with its own bathroom and space for women to feel safe. A communal kitchen where residents could cook together if they wanted or eat alone if they needed to. A therapy room. A gym. Risa had already agreed to teach self-defense classes. A children's playroom because Jane knew too many women stayed in dangerous situations because they had nowhere to take their kids. She named it Phoenix House. Elena said it was too on the nose, but Jane didn't care. She liked the symbolism. Rising from ashes. Becoming something new. Marco watched from the sidelines, offering help when she asked, but never pushing. He connected her with lawyers who helped navigate the nonprofit paperwork. He made sure the construction crew stayed on schedule. He showed up sometimes in the evenings to check on progress, hands in his pockets, asking questions that made it clear he actually cared about what she was building. "You're different," he said one night as they stood in the half-finished kitchen, reviewing paint samples. Jane looked up from the color swatches. "Different how?" "More settled, like you know where you're going now." He leaned against the counter. "When I first met you, you looked like you were bracing for a hit every second. Now you look like you'd hit back." "I had a good teacher." Jane set down the samples. "Actually, I had several. Risa taught me to fight. Sarah taught me to heal. Elena taught me that kindness doesn't have to be conditional." She met his eyes. "And you taught me that I was worth fighting for." Marco's expression did something complicated. "Jane, I'm not saying that to make it weird. I'm just stating a fact." She picked up a deep blue swatch, held it to the wall. "You could have turned me away that first night. Let my mother's plan play out. But you didn't. And I'm alive because of that choice." "You're alive because you chose to be," Marco corrected. "I just gave you the space to make that choice." "Semantics," Jane smiled. "Either way, thank you for everything." He was quiet for a moment, studying her in that intense way he had. Then he pushed off the counter. The blue's better than the gray, more welcoming. And just like that, the moment passed. But something had shifted between them. Something Jane couldn't quite name but felt nonetheless, settling warm in her chest. Sarah noticed during their next session. "You look happy," she observed. Jane considered that. Happy felt too simple for what she was experiencing, but there was definitely something there, a sense of rightness, of moving towards something instead of just running away. "I'm building something that matters," Jane said. "That feels good. And Marco? How's that relationship evolving?" Jane's face heated. "It's not a relationship. He's just helping." Sarah's smile was knowing. "Uh-huh. And how do you feel when you're around him?" "Safe. Challenged. Like I can be myself without apologizing for it." Jane paused. "Is that weird? That I feel that way about someone who's technically a criminal?" "I think human connection is complicated. And I think you're allowed to have feelings for someone who's shown you kindness." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "But Jane, you should also think about what you want moving forward. Are you rebuilding your life to eventually include a relationship, or are you focusing on yourself right now?" "I don't know. Both? Neither?" Jane laughed, frustrated. "I've never had a normal relationship. I don't even know what that looks like." "Then maybe start by being honest. With yourself and with him. See what happens." But honesty felt terrifying when Jane didn't even know what she wanted to be honest about. So she focused on Phoenix House instead, pouring all her confused feelings into tile choices and furniture orders and staffing plans. She hired carefully. A house manager named Lisa who'd escaped an abusive marriage and understood what residents would need. 2 counselors who specialized in trauma. A security consultant, Risa had insisted on proper safety measures, who designed a system that kept people out without making residents feel trapped. Every decision was intentional, designed to create the kind of safety Jane wished she'd had. 6 months into construction, Patricia Weston showed up unannounced. She walked through the space with sharp eyes, asking pointed questions, nodding occasionally. "This is good work," Patricia said finally. "You should present it to the foundation board. We have discretionary funding for projects like this. Could cover your operational costs for the first 2 years." Jane blinked. "You'd do that?" "If you make a convincing pitch, yes. The foundation needs to rebuild its reputation after your mother's disaster. Funding a project run by her daughter, the woman who exposed her, makes us look principled." Patricia's smile was calculating. "Plus, this is actually good work. That doesn't hurt." The board meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Jane spent every spare moment preparing, building a presentation that laid out Phoenix House's mission, its budget, its projected impact. Marco helped her rehearse, playing devil's advocate, asking the hard questions board members would ask. "What makes this different from existing shelters?" he challenged. "We're not just providing beds, we're providing comprehensive support, therapy, job training, legal advocacy, childcare. Everything a woman needs to actually rebuild her life, not just survive day to day." Jane clicked to the next slide. "Existing shelters do important work, but they're overwhelmed and underfunded. We're offering something more intensive, smaller capacity, but deeper impact." Marco nodded, satisfied. "Better. What about sustainability?" They went through it again and again until Jane could recite the whole pitch in her sleep. By the time the board meeting arrived, she was as ready as she'd ever be. The presentation went better than she'd hoped. The board members asked tough questions but seemed genuinely interested. Patricia backed her up when needed, adding weight to Jane's proposals. And when the vote came, it was unanimous. The foundation would fund Phoenix House's operations for 2 years, with the possibility of renewal based on outcomes. Jane walked out of that conference room feeling like she could breathe properly for the first time in months. She called Marco immediately. "We got it. Full funding." His voice was warm. "Of course you did. You were brilliant." I was terrified. Fear and brilliance aren't mutually exclusive. She could hear the smile in his voice. "Congratulations, Jane. You earned this." After they hung up, Jane sat in her car for a long time, just processing. A year ago, she'd been nothing. Nobody. A woman so broken, she'd accepted her own death as inevitable. Now she was the director of a nonprofit, preparing to open a shelter that would help dozens of women escape the same hell she'd survived. The transformation felt impossible, like it had happened to someone else. But it was real. She'd done this. Built it from nothing but pain and determination and the kind of stubborn hope that refused to die no matter how hard her mother had tried to kill it. Phoenix House opened on a cold morning in November. Jane stood in the completed common room, walls painted that deep, welcoming blue, furniture arranged to create intimate conversation areas, morning light streaming through windows that had been replaced and reinforced, and felt her throat tighten with emotion. It was perfect. Not in the Instagram-filtered way, not sterile or institutional. It looked like a home, like a place where people could actually heal. Elena had helped with the final decorating, bringing in plants and artwork and small touches that made spaces feel lived in. Risa had installed a punching bag in the gym, along with mats and equipment for her self-defense classes. Sarah had set up the therapy room with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. Everyone who'd helped Jane rebuild herself had contributed to rebuilding this space for others. And Marco had shown up that morning with coffee and breakfast pastries for the entire staff, refusing to take credit for any of the construction or legal work or connections that had made this possible. "Today's about you," he'd said when Jane tried to thank him. "Let yourself have this." The first resident arrived that afternoon, a woman named Maria, 23, with a black eye and a little girl clutching her leg. Lisa welcomed them, showed them to their room, explained how everything worked. Jane watched from a distance, remembering what it felt like to walk into safety for the first time. How foreign it had seemed, how impossible to trust. Maria's daughter, Sophia, 4 years old, spotted the playroom and gasped. "Mama, look! Toys!" "You can play, mija," Maria said softly. "It's safe here." Jane had to walk away before she started crying. She found Marco in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with his coffee, giving her space to feel what she needed to feel. "First residents here," Jane managed. "I saw." His voice was gentle. "How you holding up?" "I don't know. It feels huge. What if I can't help her? What if this whole thing is just me pretending I know what I'm doing?" "Then you'll figure it out. Same way you've figured out everything else." Marco set down his coffee. "Jane, you built this. You made something real out of your pain. That takes courage most people don't have. Stop doubting yourself." "It's hard not to. My mother spent 26 years telling me I was worthless." "Your mother was wrong about everything, including that." He crossed his arms. "Look around. This exists because you made it exist. That's not worthless. That's powerful." Jane looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something shift in her chest. This man who'd saved her life without being asked, who'd helped her destroy her mother's empire, who'd stood beside her through every terrifying step of rebuilding herself, who'd never asked for anything in return. She'd been halfway in love with him for months and hadn't let herself acknowledge it because it felt too complicated, too messy, too soon after everything with her mother. But maybe Sarah was right. Maybe she needed to be honest. "Marco, She stopped, courage failing. He waited, patient as always. "Thank you," she said instead, "for all of this. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe. But he just nodded. "Anytime." The moment passed. Jane went back to work, greeting new residents, helping staff settle into routines, making sure everything ran smoothly. But that almost confession haunted her, replaying in her head during quiet moments. Phoenix House filled up quickly. Women arrived broken and scared, carrying trauma like luggage. Jane watched them slowly unfold, learning to trust the safety, to believe they deserved more than what they'd survived. She saw herself in each of them, the flinching, the apologizing, the way they made themselves small, like taking up space was a crime. And she watched them heal, watched therapy and community and safety do their slow, necessary work. Watched women who'd been beaten down start standing straighter, speaking louder, believing they were worth fighting for. It was exhausting and beautiful, and everything Jane had hoped it would be. 3 months after opening, she was in her office late, reviewing applications for a grant that would let them expand capacity, when Marco appeared in the doorway. "You're still here," he said. "So are you." Jane set down her pen. "What's up?" Marco came in, closed the door behind him. He looked serious in a way that made Jane's stomach drop. I need to tell you something, he said. Jane braced herself. Okay. I'm getting out. He said it simply, like it wasn't the most shocking thing he could have said. The family business, all of it. I'm done. Jane stared at him. What? Why? Because I'm tired of living that life, tired of the violence, the paranoia, the constant waiting for someone to make a move. He sat in the chair across from her desk. I've been thinking about it for a while. Since the night I met you, actually. Watching you rebuild yourself made me realize I could do the same thing. Choose something different. What are you going to do instead? Legitimate business. I've got investments, properties, enough clean money to start over. He met her eyes. And I want to help here. With Phoenix House. Not financially. You don't need my money anymore. But with security consulting, legal navigation, all the background work that keeps places like this running. Jane's heart was pounding. You want to work with me. I want to work with you. For you. Whatever makes sense. He leaned forward. Jane, I've spent 20 years building an empire I don't even want anymore. Watching you build something that actually matters. It made me realize how empty my life has been. I want to be part of something real. And I want to be around you while I do it. The confession hung in the air between them. Marco, Jane's voice came out shaky. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I care about you. I have for months. I'm saying that helping you has been the best thing I've done in years. And I'm saying that if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I'd like to see where this goes. He paused. But I need you to know I'm not the same person I was. I'm choosing to be different. For myself, yeah, but also for you. Jane stood, came around the desk, and did something she'd been wanting to do for months. She kissed him. It was tentative at first, testing, but when Marco's arms came around her, it deepened into something certain, something that felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, Jane was breathless. I've been wanting to do that for a while, she admitted. Marco's smile was real, warm. Nothing like the cold calculation she'd seen that first night. You should have. I was scared of messing this up, of losing you if it went wrong. You're not going to lose me. He cupped her face gently. I'm all in, Jane. Whatever this is, wherever it goes, I'm all in. Jane believed him, not because he said it, but because she'd watched him prove it over and over for the past year. Marco DeLuca kept his promises. And if he said he was choosing her, choosing this, then he meant it. Okay, she said. Then let's figure this out, together. The next 6 months were a study in building something new. Marco stepped away from his organization gradually, transferring operations to his second-in-command, making it clear he was out for good. It wasn't clean. There were people who didn't believe him, who thought it was a trick, who tried to pull him back in. But he held firm, and eventually they accepted it. He moved into a condo in the same neighborhood as Phoenix House, started showing up for dinner service, talking to residents, offering the kind of steady male presence many of them had never experienced without violence attached to it. He was careful, respectful, never pushing, and slowly the women learned to trust him the way Jane had. Risa found it hilarious. Never thought I'd see the day Marco DeLuca serves spaghetti to domestic violence survivors. Life's weird, Marco said mildly, stirring sauce. Jane watched him navigate this new world, so different from the one he'd left behind, and felt something in her chest settle. This was right, not perfect, because nothing was perfect, but right in the way that mattered. They took it slow, both of them learning what a relationship looked like when it wasn't built on fear or control. Marco taught Jane what healthy boundaries felt like. Jane taught Marco that vulnerability wasn't weakness. They fought sometimes, about finances, about her working too much, about his protective instincts that occasionally veered into controlling, but they learned to fight fair, to apologize when they screwed up, to choose each other even when it was hard. Sarah approved, naturally. You're both doing the work. That's what matters. Elena was less subtle. About time you two figured it out. I've been waiting for this since the beginning. And Risa just punched Marco's shoulder and told him if he hurt Jane, she'd break both his kneecaps. He promised she'd get the chance if it came to that. 1 year after Phoenix House opened, Jane stood in front of the staff and residents for their anniversary celebration. The common room was full, women who'd come through the program and moved on, women still in residence, Staff members, volunteers, and Marco standing in the back with his arms crossed and pride written all over his face. "When I started this," Jane said, voice steady despite the emotion threatening to choke her, "I wanted to build something that would have saved me, a place where women could be more than their trauma, where they could remember they were whole people who deserved safety and respect and a second chance." She looked around the room at faces she'd come to know. Maria, who'd arrived with a black eye and was now enrolled in nursing school. Keisha, who'd been so broken she couldn't speak for the first week and was now leading peer support groups. Amara, who'd come with 3 kids and no hope and was working full-time while saving for an apartment. "You've all taught me that healing isn't linear. It's messy and hard, and sometimes it feels impossible. But it's also worth it, every single time." Jane's voice cracked. "Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for being brave enough to choose yourselves. And thank you for showing me that survival can become something beautiful." The applause was thunderous. Women stood, cheering, some crying. Jane felt tears streaming down her own face and didn't bother wiping them away. After the celebration wound down, she found Marco in the garden they'd built out back. He was sitting on a bench, face tilted toward the evening sun. "You did good in there," he said as she sat beside him. "We did good. None of this happens without you." "I think you'd have figured it out." But he smiled, pleased. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights blink on as darkness fell. "I've been thinking," Marco said eventually. About what comes next. For us." He turned to face her. "I love you, Jane. I think I've loved you since you shook my hand in my office and decided to fight. And I want to build a life with you, a real one." Jane's breath caught. "Marco, I'm not proposing, not yet. I know we're still figuring this out." He took her hand, "But I want you to know that's where I'm headed, toward a future with you in it, permanently." Jane looked at this man who'd saved her life, who'd stood beside her while she rebuilt herself, who'd chosen to become someone better because he'd seen what better could look like. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, broken and silent and convinced she was worthless. That girl never could have imagined this. A life built on purpose instead of pain, surrounded by people who chose to be there, with someone who loved her, not despite her scars, but because of everything she'd survived to get here. "I love you too," she said, "and I want that future. With you." Marco kissed her, soft and certain, a promise of all the tomorrows they'd build together. When they finally pulled apart, Jane looked back at Phoenix House. Lights glowed in the windows. Inside, women were safe, healing, learning they were worth more than what had been done to them. Her mother had tried to erase her, turn her into nothing, make her disappear. Instead, Jane had become something her mother could never destroy, someone who survived, who chose to rise, who transformed pain into purpose and built something that would outlast them both. Phoenix House would help hundreds of women over the years, thousands maybe. Each one a testament to the truth Jane had learned the hard way, that survival was only the beginning. The real victory was choosing to live. And Jane Whitmore, no longer invisible, no longer silent, no longer afraid, was finally fully alive.